Well, good afternoon, Scott Baker.
Mikey Ames, how are you today?
Yep.
October 16th, this edition of Lead Better would be for field note number 1589. The title is, Are You Rewarding Performance Theater Over Real Performance? So performance theater would seem to be the key phrase here. So how are you defining that?
It's like everybody knows how to hide in plain sight, right? Or we know people that do this all the time in the office who, feel like they're not quite pulling their own weight, but they know the exact right time to kind of poke their head up and say the right thing at the right time to make it look like they're the one who's leading the project. They're the ones who are really the ones who were in charge on it, even though they really didn't, their activity and their actual input was a lot less. And I feel like, we as a society, especially in the United States, has gotten better at this bad habit. There's a lot more group projects that are being assigned in school than when you and I were kids.
Yeah.
It seems like all of my kids' projects are group projects these days.
Yeah,
They're even
that's what I'm
taking group
saying.
tests as well.
Yeah.
And which is a unique thing to kind of talk about. And so, and I don't know if our schools in Texas kind of went that direction because they felt like it actually creates a more collaborative worker who will be needing to know how to work in groups. And so making it individual. I mean, I don't really understand the philosophy behind it, but I think what it has really created is a lot of kids who are figuring out how to hide in plain sight.
How to hide in plain sight. Yeah. Now, and it came up, I think, in our Admire Leadership Community Conference the other day about the kinds of people who are not so good about advocating for themselves, right?
Sure.
There is that kind of person.
Yes.
And there are other field notes for those kinds of people.
Right. And if you had a mom who always told you not to, talk about yourself, and you came from, a society or a social group or a church where talking about yourself was a social ill,
right.
Then you probably from a very early on learned that, you wait for other people to discover you. It's more powerful that way. And while that's true, it means that when you see other people who are getting further ahead and really learned the craft of self-promotion, you're just going to vilify that and then be upset about the fact that, nice guys finish last or whatever the bromide that you have about it. But it does create a bit of a paradox, right? How do you actually deal with that?
Well, let's underline the heart of what's in this field note. And then I think you and I can unpack a couple of the pieces here in some ways that might be really helpful, because the field note is addressing this kind of person who is, as you indicated, kind of always putting out there what they did, what they produced, the results of that, what their sales figures were, the results, how that idea really kind of came from this point and where that, tracks back to. And they're always kind of pointing back to themselves. And it's kind of like, the comedian I know that you've listened to a lot over the years, Pete Holmes, when he says there's two kinds of people. There's the look at me, look at me, look at me people. And then there's the I see you people.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I see what you're doing. You're, and they're in a good way, like in a good of saying, like, I've noticed the performance. Now, good leaders are going to be a good mix of that. But there's a lot of look at me people in the world. And this field note is about the kind of people in organizations that do that. And the point of the field note for the leader who's reading it is not, how do you deal with these annoying people who are always claiming credit? It's really, how do you sort through what you're hearing in terms of this and what really is happening?
Yeah.
Because maybe the person that's claiming credit or pointing to themselves, maybe they didn't do as much as they really think that they even did, and it was the person down the hall. So you as a leader need to be recognizing who are the real performers and who are the people that are just doing the performance act, the performance theater.
Right. So, it's a handful of behaviors that you look out for, that you say, okay, that person is a look at me kind of person. And so to be able to identify some of those behaviors. Now, that being said, it doesn't let us off the hook as leaders to just allow them to just wallow in their look at me kind of,
right. Yeah.
ethic. I'd like to think that, a good culture that is being taught would kind of try to get some of that stuff worked out of people.
Sure.
But
Well, and
it's
I think that generally, when we've talked a little bit around this issue in the past, we would just advise leaders, you just kind of blow past it. You don't refeed it, right? You don't be like,
Right.
oh, well, tell me more about how you did that. You go,
Yes.
oh, okay. And then you go, Pete, what did you work on in that? And you kind of dig into on another piece of it. And then over time, maybe people start to get the message.
Right. So it's very possible that if you are a leader who's raised in the ranks and you're no longer doing any trench work,
Mm-hmm.
that this is a problem for you because you don't know how to interpret, the difference between those that are really working hard and those that are just giving lip service about it. And sometimes that could be really difficult, especially if there's this competing nature of like, well, I'm actually the kind of person who did work really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of trying to defend myself against this person who's pretending that they worked really hard. And they're beating me to the punch by saying the things I would have said ahead of time. So the complication of how a leader actually tells the difference between those two people it's not
Right.
trivial. It's sometimes difficult to be able to tell.
Well, and that's why the field note says, the best leaders are not fooled, right?
Right.
They start to get a sense for where they get a sense that visibility does not necessarily equal value, right? That I've got to dig under the hood a little bit to kind of see what really is going on inside the engine. Now, one of the things that we kind of talked about yesterday when we were talking about leaders as sort of having an editorial mindset, that process of editing and selecting is kind of the same thing. It's where should I as a leader, where should my attention really be in this moment? So one of the things that I think that we would see here is that if you have people that are hesitant to point out value, that's also a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we talked about, Chris Cassidy brought it up on our Admired Leadership Community Conference the other day. Former Navy SEAL, captain in the Navy, bronze medal winner, NASA astronaut, chief astronaut at NASA, very accomplished, head of the Medal of Honor Museum now in Dallas. And he kind of talked about the fact that one of the things that when you were picking people to be in a Navy SEAL team or to be on a NASA mission, and everybody's got a particular role, and a lot of this is not, there's not a lot of philosophers and poets on a NASA mission, right? He's like, we're really just plumbers and mechanics, in a very unusual atmosphere.
But they're all leaders.
Yeah, they're all leaders. And he was saying, you have to be the salesperson. You have to be able to communicate clearly, stand up for what needs to be said. And if you can't do that, you're probably not going to make it on an elite team. Right. So even as we're saying, this is a leader sorting through the performance theater, you actually, I think you would probably want to have, you would prefer to have a team of people that are communicating very clearly, sometimes too much, than not enough. And so I think that's part of this, the balance that I would bring to this field note is that you as a leader should not be necessarily irritated that people are trying to say, hey, look at me, because what are you trying to do in the world? You're trying to get clients, you're trying to make the clients happy. And in order to do that, you have to show them, here's the value that we actually have added for you here.
Right.
And people miss things all the time. And people do this because they know that leaders miss this all the time. And I think that one of the ways that you solve this problem comes back to the leader, which is if you actually are doing the diligent work to say, who is really making a difference here? Where is the real value? And if you are continually recognizing that and you're not missing it, then nobody feels the need to kind of over raise their hand to make sure the spotlight's coming to them.
Right. Okay. So what if you are currently missing it? What if most of the feedback that you get from your team is from these people who, they're strategically piping up, but not actually participating very much in the real work. So they sound like they're great performers, but they're not actually. And the rest of your team are just kind of these put their head down and work really hard kind of folk. And so the only, the main feedback you're getting is from these people that you don't really want to get it from, right? How is it that you can if you're aware of it, change that up, right? What's the thing to be able to do? Is it really just a matter of making people speak in meetings when they're not used to it? Asking limiting everybody to 30 words, and you've used your words up for the day, so you can't say anything more about yourself? Or
Well, I think whatever the projects and initiatives that are underway in your organization or on your athletic team or whatever it is, people will know who the real performers are.
Mhm.
And if you are the leader, you gotta know the pulse, right? You got to be checking in, what's going on, who's doing what, who needs help, who's behind on this project. Maybe not because they're a failure, maybe they got overloaded and they need a little extra help. And when you're doing that, you're getting a lot of the signals because people on the team know, right? And I kind of have a feeling that like we sort of have a stereotype for the person in this field note is kind of like the salesperson who is just determined to make sure that everybody knows that they set the quarterly record again,
Right.
7 quarters in a row, right? And you're like, I'm actually kind of glad that you are who you are, or else you wouldn't be doing the sales that you're doing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so you have to have a degree of toleration, for that. And so, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to get fooled by things that I shouldn't be fooled by. And that's why performance theater is not a bad way of putting it. And in fact, in the original edit of this, the original writer had used the British sort of spelling of theater with the R-E at the end. And some people, not a lot, use that even in America to distinguish between the theater of the building, right, and the actual process of creating the art, which would be the R-E. Usually in American idioms, it's actually the same, and you just use the same word. But we think of the word performance artist, right, a lot. The person that's kind of the provocateur, they're doing the thing in the public demonstration, they're doing something that's disturbing. So that's our connotation for the idea of performance art. So performance theater is just saying, when that person comes in, well, what's the term that we would use for like an actor who's kind of chewing the scenery, right?
Chewing the furniture, yeah.
Yeah, right. They're going to be like, all right, everybody, I'm going to show you now. I'm doing some acting now, right? Yeah. And they're going they just go to 10. And you're like, okay, just dial it back about 20 notches, and we might be okay.
Right. So the field note says, rather than focus on what team members say about their work, good leaders will look for the actual examples where the output influences the entire team. So, but to what end? This is because you do have some kind of reward or recognition in mind. And so the symbolism of you handing it out to the person when everybody else knows that person really didn't do the lion's share of the work. There's going to be some hard feelings that are going to be created. And it feels as the leader when you recognize the wrong person.
Yeah, if that happens. And the other point is, it's not a matter of saying, okay, Sharon is really making sure we all know what she did, but I'm going to go over here, to Sophie and give her the quarterly bonus. It's not just it's not a 1-for-1 kind of thing. It's, are you a leader who consistently is saying performance, calling people out and saying, that was tremendous. That was so critical to what we were able to do. The idea that you brought up, like 2 weeks ago as an aside, I've now made that best practice, And when you're doing that, then people start to feel appreciated, which you as a leader should be finding ways to make that real, right? And then I do think that evens out this problem.
Right. So, what is acting and what is real, right? The best actors, you can't really tell, right? Because they make it real for themselves.
Well, let me point this out because I know we're in the last minute. On our, we're going to be probably making references to our community conference for a while, since we had great conversations, and thanks to everybody that registered. We had a tremendous number. But somebody pointed out that we were talking about this process. How do you tell when you're trying to attract? The focus of our thing was attracting extraordinary talent.
Right.
So some people will have a certain kind of resume, and they'll have a certain claim around their abilities and their what they've done in the past and everything else. And Shannon, who was on the panel with us at the end, was talking about, like, in her school where she's a principal, people apply, a lot of people apply for an open position, and there's really a show me test that needs to be done.
Sure.
And that's kind of what we're talking about in this. But in her case, there was like somebody applying for a music position, and they generally say, well, bring your instrument. Like, we want to hear you play. We want to hear what you do. And most people are happy to do that. And somebody got surprised at this question, and they just quietly left the interview because they said on the resume or the application that they could play, and they could not, right? They're like, uh-oh, I have been found out.
That made me wonder if they'd actually got a position as a music teacher prior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And still felt like they could, do it again.
So with our own team, when they're claiming credit or people that aren't claiming credit, nobody's applying for a job, but you're doing the same test.
Yes.
You're saying, let me look to see, how did that come about? Explain your thinking on that to me. What were the pivotal parts in this process? When did you think that it was, when did you know that this was the right course? Were there any moments of doubt? And then you can go back and you're talking to other people on the team, and you're not being a Columbo. The goal of you in this process is not that you're going to be like, and what was that other thing? Wait a minute, you're wrong. You're fired, right? I mean, the goal here is not to be the punitive leader that's trying to play gotcha over little things. You're looking for big patterns. You don't want to have the blowhard and have them start getting accolades, and it irritates everybody else. It's all a matter of this balance, but you really should be looking out for, like, you are the detective for figuring out what really went right and why did it go right.
Right. All right. Fantastic. Thanks for your time today.
Talk again tomorrow.
All right. Bye.